Hey guys, a little podcast for you today again. We had the natural selection evolution kind of intro last class. Today we're going to take it a step further. You did your activity with the ants and then you did the podcast notes, and now we're going to look at a little bit more specifics on how those traits are selected for. So we know that evolution is going to be a change in population over time. What actually changes in those populations though, and why do those changes take place? So a little bit of recap. So change in a gene frequency, so what traits are available in population, that's what's happening with evolution. We have different types of selection pressures, so things that put pressure on a population so that certain traits are able to survive and other traits will not. This is not a random process. Just want to point that out because it is important to realize that there is randomness to survival in some cases, but in most cases, if you have the means to survive and you have the traits that allow you to survive, you are going to survive. And so it's not random that those traits continue to get passed on because they suit the environment better. So just to recap here, obviously natural selection, traits that improve the survival and or reproduction of a population, because even if you survive, it doesn't do any good if you don't reproduce. So first question in your notes, what drives adaptation and the selection of traits? Those are environmental pressures. So these are pressures that are within the environment in which the organism is living in, and they put pressure on the organism to either the population over time has to adapt or they're not going to be around. And in most cases, that pressure is put on individuals. So individuals that have certain traits, they are able to pass those traits on because they survive. Individuals that don't have appropriate traits, they don't survive. And therefore, if you don't survive, you can't pass on those traits. So the organism that is the individual that is able to survive, they pass on the traits, those traits become more prevalent. Some examples of environmental pressures, so you guys understand what environmental pressures are, would be like climate. Three different biomes that we're looking at here. We have a desert biome, we have a rainforest biome, and we have a tundra. They all have different temperatures, precipitation, winds, and many other factors that the organisms that live there have to survive. And if they don't have the appropriate traits, they will not be able to survive in that environment. You are not going to take a desert tortoise and put them in a tundra and have them survive. That just isn't going to work. And vice versa, there are organisms that live in these cold temperatures that you would think, well, they can go further south and they can survive in these other biomes, but they can't do that either because they are not made to live in those environments. Those populations have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to survive in the biomes in which they're in. Another environmental pressure, simple one that a lot of people don't think of as environmental, but that's predation. An environmental pressure like predation, you either eat or you get eaten. Okay, so you either survive or you don't. So in this diagram here, the buffalo seems to be outnumbered. Is it going to survive or not? We will never know because I don't want you to cry. So that's why I decided not to put in a picture of the wolves eating a buffalo. You can end that story how you want. Does this buffalo have the traits that will allow it to escape or fight off its predators? Or are the wolves, with the traits that they possess, going to take down this majestic beast and have dinner? You decide. So question 2, what types of selection are there? So it kind of, obviously based off of the environmental pressures, we have 3 main types of selection. We have predation selection, physiological selection, and sexual selection. First one, predation selection. It selects for traits. Those traits affect the survival of that individual, of the organism that possesses the traits. They act on both predator and prey. So if a predator has appropriate traits, it is able to get more prey. If a prey has appropriate traits, it will get away from the predator. So it's actually an interconnected set of traits. So it has to do with how they behave, Do they have camouflage or mimicry? And we know that both predator and prey can have camouflage. A hunter needs to be camouflaged so he can hunt his prey. A prey needs to have camouflage so that it can hide from its predator. So camouflage works in both ways. Mimicry, we'll talk about in just a second here. Mimicry is like this. We know that a monarch butterfly, you guys have all seen them. Well, there's another butterfly called the viceroy. The viceroy looks like a monarch because a monarch is actually slightly toxic and poisonous to organisms, and so most organisms do not eat monarchs because of that quality. It'll make them sick. So the viceroy has actually co-evolved with the monarch to actually look like the monarch because it's like, hey, I look like that guy over there and I'm not getting eaten. That's great. And so therefore they survive and they pass on their traits. Even though they're not toxic or poisonous, they look enough like the monarch to have the predators will second guess. The speed. Okay, so now this is one here where, boy, this blue jay got a nice mouthful of this butterfly here. Is there going to be enough speed? Can they get away, or can it catch its prey? So speed is another one of those devices amongst the predation selection. Do you need speed or not, depending on what other defense mechanisms you have? So we know we have speed like our cheetah here runs pretty fast. Now it might be fast, but you know, it's not the strongest. So sometimes it has to choose prey that is not the biggest, so it's not going to get the biggest meal. So it has to use its traits to its advantage. Defenses, we got this guy here. We know that the defense are going to be the horns on top of its head. If a predator comes after it, it's going to use its antlers or horns to defend itself and hopefully not get eaten. Plants have the same thing. They have thorns. You guys have, I'm sure, all experienced at some point in your life thorns on a plant. That is a physical defense system. And sometimes those thorns actually have chemical poisons in them or toxins in them as well that act as a defense mechanism as well. So that's our first type of selection, is predation. Physiological selection is how the body functions. So if there is a disease that's going through a population of a single organism, there is going to be a couple individuals, at least a couple individuals, that are immune or resistant to that disease. If they have the proper internal functioning, like the immune system, if their immune system is able to fight off or defend against that infection, they will survive and they will pass on those traits to the offspring that they produce. You can also look at the physiological efficiency. So how do they use oxygen? How do they use food? How do they store water? A good example of that would be like camels. That is a physiological selection where camels that are able to store more water in their hump, more moisture, they're able to last longer in a desert, so that's good. Physiological protection from injury. So however they work, or protection from injury or death, I guess we could say. For example here, kind of have a quick little note here. So some fish have a variation for producing antifreeze protein. A long time ago, the oceans froze over and some of those fish had that protein, so it got cold enough that it could have potentially freeze their bodies, but they didn't. This is also an example, or a current example. Frogs have the physiological ability to actually freeze during the winter. And you might think they're dead, but they actually are able to produce this antifreeze type substance that when it warms up again, their blood is going to start flowing. And so a long time ago, their ancestors, those frogs, the frogs that did not have that trait or did not have that ability, they died off because they froze out and died in winter. The ones that did have that trait were able to pass that trait on to their offspring, and that's why it is in the current population. Last type of selection is sexual selection. If you survive, as I said before, it doesn't do any good if you don't pass on your traits. So sexual selection is, are you a presentable male or mate? In most cases I said male because a lot of times it's the females choose the males. Do the females want to mate with that male or not? So they have ways of showing their fertility. You guys have all been to the zoo. You've seen the peacocks. You know that they have the big tail feathers and they're like, and they're all trying to attract the females. And when they display their feathers, they're trying to show the bigger the tail feathers they have and the more beautiful they are, the more fertile they are. Same thing with the mule deer down here in the lower left-hand corner. Those mule deer, they are able to actually show their fertility by having that enlarged neck during the mating season and a larger antler rack, and then they fight, and the female will mate with the male that is the stronger of the two. So once you show that you are more fertile and you are going to produce stronger offspring, you are able to mate and send your genes down the line. So what kind of adaptations do we have? We have 3 types: physical, behavioral, and physiological. Physical is going to be a change that is actually the structural makeup, physical appearance of the organism. For example, we have the snowy owl here. It has the white during the winter so it can hide in the trees and catch its prey, and also protect it from anything else that's going after it. Birds also have another physical adaptation that is going to be these hollow bones. The lighter the bones, the easier it is for them to fly. And because of that, that is a physical adaptation. Behavioral adaptation is going to be a change within their behavior, how they act, and how they live their lives. So behavioral, for example, you have bird calls. So behavioral is, hey, I'm calling you, I'm looking for my mate. This guy over here is making some calls. He's trying to find the love of his life. And he calls out and hopefully finds a prospective mate that is going to help carry on the traits that he has. Another example is herding. That's a behavioral thing. They herd together for protection, and they also are there that they're in a herd because then it's easier to find a mate. So as you can see here, they are migrating, or they, to go from warmer temperatures to cooler temperatures, or vice versa, or they herd up because it helps them with protection. Physiological is our last type of adaptation. It's the change of the inner workings of the organism's body. The organism's body reacts to the environment, and if it reacts properly, then it is going to survive and pass on its traits. For example, goosebumps in humans. It allows us to stay warmer. Well, this actually happens not just in humans, but it happens in other organisms. If they are able to react and they have this, their body reacts to cold, the hair stands up, it keeps them warmer because it keeps heat trapped, and allows them to survive colder temperatures. That's a physiological adaptation. Another one is shedding fur. We know that in the fall, animals gain more fur, like especially this buffalo here. It gains more fur to keep warm throughout the winter. And then in the spring, the chemical makeup in its body has all these things happening within its body, and it says, hey, time to lose this fur. So it drops the excess fur so they can stay cooler during the summer months. Then again, when we get back to fall, it adds more fur, a thicker fur layer to keep it warm during the winter. So that is a physiological adaptation for the buffalo. So these are types of adaptations. You are going to take this information and complete a document that is this. Well, the document is going to take you through, and you're going to choose an animal, and you have to look at the adaptations that your animal has. 2 things to think about. Where does it live? Why does it live there? And then it should help you with determining, okay, what adaptation does it have? And your teacher will hand those sheets out once you finish the notes. Thank you.